Today I will tell you the entire story of the book The Twisted Ones, being the second of the complete stories. This video will not be completely accurate, many scenes have been cut, but the essential is there, so subscribe to the channel, leave a like and pay attention to the twisted animatronics. It's been a year since the traumatizing events of the last video, copyright restrictions and 1,000 problems. Now Charlie is trying to move forward. She moved back to Hurricane again for a new school. Since Charlie is greedy and has no money, he lives with Jessica, the only person who evidently spends money on a half-stranger. She even had to argue with her Aunt Jen to return to that traumatic place. In fact, she had practically run away. The problems are not over, because Charlie has started, since his 18th birthday, to have recurring nightmares about his dead twin Sammy. Returning to the present, Charlie had to meet John that day. In fact, he had found a job nearby, and since they were friends there was no need to worry, right? No. Having the only experience together with Freddy's, Charlie didn't know what to talk about, and he certainly didn't want to talk about that memory. However, Jessica, in her usual way, reassured her friend, who went to the meeting. John was waiting for her with a book in his hand. He was bigger than the previous year. Speaking, John reveals to Charlie how a tornado destroyed Hurricane, which is why he was working there, but one of the many houses hit was Charlie's old house. This news shocks the girl, given that she lived in that house, but John hasn't finished. In fact, he asks Charlie on a date. She accepts. Charlie heads towards the dormitory happy to meet her old friend, but the good news doesn't last long. On her way she runs into Clay Burke, who gives her some disconcerting news. Clay explains to Charlie how he found a body in a field with cuts similar to those from the Freddy's Snap Lock costume. Charlie notes that the wounds on that body are eerily similar to those of Latch Locks, but first, how could that be possible? Freddy's had been torn down after what happened last year. The costumes had been recalled. How could that man have found a costume? Having reported her thoughts to the police chief, Charlie returned to the college, now more worried than ever. Could he have survived and now he was creating these killing suits? It wasn't possible. Dave had died in front of her. Maybe that man had found a suit and then worn it, but how? Furthermore, that night Charlie had a terrible nightmare. He was in the warehouse of his father's old restaurant, not Freddy's but Fredbear. He was playing with his brother Sammy, when a shadow appeared on the doorstep, picked up Sammy and took him with him. Charlie wakes up, luckily, and goes to class. In fact, she is starting to study robotics, a bit like her father. She also created 2 small robotic heads, which talk to each other. These heads learn words that are said in the room, record them and use them to communicate. Furthermore, Charlie has built a device so that the heads can see you. That evening, Charlie met John for dinner, but after all something continued to torment her. Not only the body that Clay had shown her gave her anxiety, but also her constant nightmares about Sammy. Furthermore, another distressing piece of news had been revealed. When Clay and his men had cleaned up Freddy's, Clay had found fake blood. Perhaps Dave had really survived. John noticed how anxious Charlie was, so he asked her what was happening. Charlie explained everything to him. That's why Charlie would like to go back to Freddy's to check. At those words John got angry. After all, it was impossible that Dave was alive and was killing people with Snap costumes. Charlie returned to the dormitory, but Jessica was waiting for her, who immediately asked her how it went. She replied well, but that she needed new clothes for the next appointment. So the next day they would have to go to a shopping center, right? Of course not. The girls in fact went to a shopping center, but an abandoned one, the same one that contained Freddy's. They entered the now destroyed pizzeria. Not completely. The tornado had brought many workers to rebuild what it had destroyed. That's why the work had not been completed. There were no animatrons, but everything had been destroyed or taken away. The girls from the main room went to the pirates' hideout, opened the curtain where Foxy had once closed and, surprised, the body of the night watchman was hanging between various wires of the pirate's hideout. It was as if he had merged with his now greenish rabbit costume. Bones, organs and pieces of metal were sticking out of the costume. Charlie, having confirmed that the Guardian was dead, and that he wasn't trying to kill random people with costumes, left. That day he had to meet Artie, a classmate of his who wanted his help. Charlie met him, but while he was explaining the various procedures he missed. But while Artie was trying to follow the explanations given by her, Charlie noticed various rectangles drawn in his notebook. They were not rectangles, but doors. Charlie suddenly thought back to his recurring nightmares about Sammy. She and him were playing in Fredbear's warehouse when a black shadow appears on the doorstep, takes Sammy and leaves. The whole small warehouse is transformed into a corridor with a door. Here Charlie desperately tries to open it but nothing can be done. Charlie panics, apologizes and hastily says goodbye to Artie, who looks at her confused. Charlie goes out by car, but in a field he finds several vultures intent on eating something. Charlie understands that something is someone. In fact, another body with the same wounds as the man Clay had shown her was lying dead on the ground. But the most terrifying thing, it's that woman looked like her. Not really, but someone could get confused. Charlie called Clay, who arrived immediately. Same wounds, but Clay told Charlie that woman, it could also have been her twin. Charlie, annoyed, she replied to Clay with another question. What can I do to help you? The chief of police took the dead woman's license and gave Charlie the address. Charlie then went to the dead woman's house to look for evidence and clues about what happened. The door of the house was strangely open. The whole house was in order. The house was completely clean, but in the back garden there were 3 graves. Charlie froze. What were they? What were they for? He brought everything back to Clay and went on a date with John. He was 2 hours late. Charlie ran towards the apartment, and to his surprise, John was still there. The girl joined him, but he had already eaten. Charlie told him everything that had happened that day. She had the feeling of seeing her father's house, so the 2 boys set off for the abandoned house. After the tornado, Charlie's father's house was completely abandoned. A tree had destroyed half the roof, and it looked like the structure could collapse at any moment. Charlie wanted to find out something in that house, who was building those robots, but above all, where his twin Sammy was, because according to his nightmares, he was somewhere behind a metal door. It was absurd, but after the Freddy's event, with dead children possessing the robots, and the killer ready to kill again, this didn't seem so absurd. After all, Sammy had been kidnapped, not killed. Charlie and John entered the house. As from the outside, even the inside seemed to give way at any moment. The 2 entered Charlie's old room, but something worrying caught the boys' attention. Stanley the unicorn, Charlie's old toy, was broken on the floor. It couldn't have been the tornado. Charlie together with John headed towards his father's workshop. This had been almost completely destroyed by the tornado. Among the rubble, Charlie was desperately looking for some clues about Sammy. Finding nothing, Charlie began to get more and more nervous, so much so that she took it out on John. The boy doesn't have the slightest idea why. Charlie goes from being nervous to resign. Charlie explains to John his nightmares about Sammy. John hugs her, trying to confront her. But in a moment of peace, something strange in the garden attracts attention. The 2 boys went into the garden. 3 graves, like those in the victim's house, had been dug for who knows what purpose. Among these, an animatron had emerged. Charlie began to dig. The animatron turned out to be Foxy, but a huge and scary version. Charlie's father hadn't built it, was impossible. The animator suddenly stood up, grabbing Charlie and changing his being. From a metallic animatron without fur, he had become a scary animatron with teeth everywhere, and his cover was red. An annoying ringing sounded in the boy's ears. The animatron with terrifying force dragged Charlie into his belly full of snap locks, but John removed his head in time. The animatron's body fell, leaving Charlie free. But Charlie still heard a buzz, so he started looking for something in the animatron. He found a disc with Afton Robotics written on it. Charlie turned it off, and the animatron became gray again. A featureless robot. Charlie turned it back on, and the animatron became red again with fur and other details that weren't there before. Charlie understood. That disc emitted a particular frequency that changed the animatron's perception of human sight. After explaining this to John, Charlie took it and put it in his pocket. John and Charlie went to the girls' dormitory because she wanted to formulate a theory. She wanted to map the areas where those robots were hiding underground. She took a hurricane map. While they were talking, the 2 boys were joined by Jessica, who asked what they were doing. John immediately made up an excuse, but Jessica revealed to him that she and Charlie had gone to Freddy's. John got angry with Charlie for that secret. The now cornered girl reveals everything she knew to her friends. The 3 make peace and help Charlie in his theory. Mapping the route between Charlie's old house, the field where the body was found, and the victim's house, Charlie realizes how all this is close not to his school, but to his dormitory. Charlie comes to the conclusion that those robots want her, and goes crazy. John tries to calm her down, saying that even if they want her, now they know where these things are headed. During the day, the 3 boys went to search in the areas close to those of the accidents. Charlie saw a particular piece of land. It had been emptied and then replaced. Some had been buried. The 3 boys began digging, finding a metallic bear head. They had found another one of those things. Charlie dug, and yes, it was a Freddy Fazbear, but like that, Foxy, strangely gray. The boys called Clay and informed him about everything, so the policeman decided to wait for the night to see the crime. The 4 went to Clay's car and waited for the night. In the meantime, Charlie was studying the Afton Robotics diskette, explaining it to his friends, but a few hours later, everyone was sleeping. The only one awake was the police chief, who was thinking about his argument with his wife Betty. After a few hours, Clay saw something, woke up the boys, and together they went to check. The group went to check. Charlie was the first to see it. Another frighteningly tall animatron, with a fox mane and a contour arm, was wandering around the woods. Charlie remained motionless. The creature opened its belly and released a bloody woman's body. The monster's belly was covered with snap locks. Clay went to the almost dead woman. The beast was gone. Fortunately, the woman was not dead, and could have been saved, before Clay took her to the hospital. Charlie noticed how that woman also looked like her. There was something underneath. The next day, John went to the girls' dormitory to ask her out. Charlie accepted, but it was a lie. She knew that those monsters wanted her. She knew that this was something about Sammy. So in the evening, just before the appointment with John, Charlie got ready. He took the head of his toy Theodore, the body he had used for experiments, and some pajamas. Charlie drove in the same direction where those killer robots went to kill people. Charlie found a suspicious house. He tried to enter. The door was open. A modern house, but fake. There was a TV, but no cable. The tables were made of fake wood. It was a trap, but Charlie knew it. She wanted to be captured, so she can find Sammy. Maybe she know that his twin was still alive. Charlie pretended to be asleep. He was waiting for the animatrons. At a certain point the girl heard heavy footsteps. Charlie tried not to run away. He had to do it. It was her they wanted. He had to meet Sammy again. It was the only way. He had to stay calm. At a certain point, the bed where Charlie was sleeping was grabbed by hands. Charlie looked, trying not to scream. A brown bear head with a hat appeared from under the bed. That Freddy that the boys had previously found buried was now ready to catch the girl. Charlie tried not to scream. The robot was dragging her into its belly full of snap locks. Her head was changing. Charlie felt the buzzing like that of the fox. He screamed, but it was too late. John in the meantime was waiting for Charlie, who was 24 minutes late, worried. John called Clay asking him if he knew about Charlie. He replied no, so John warned him of his worries. Clay then took him with him in the car. They walked along the path that those robots took. A house with dirt and an open door was visible along the road. Clay pulled over. The two entered the house. Surely one of those robots had committed another crime. They found no one, only the head of Charlie Theodore's beloved toy. The robot had taken it. Clay, desperate, took Jin to his house. Jessica, having heard the news, joined the two. Clay's house was very messy, clothes and rubbish everywhere. Clay signaled to the two boys to follow him. The two did so. They entered the cellar. John and Jessica were shocked by what they saw. The animatrons of old Freddy's were slumped against each other. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy. Clay explained to the boys how he had secretly dragged them into the cellar, and was trying to wake them up. John tried to ask the animatrons questions, but they wouldn't answer. When the boy did, named William Afton, all four animatrons began to have violent spasms. The three boys ran away and took refuge in the kitchen. When the noises stopped, Clay, John and Jessica came out of the kitchen. The animatrons had run away from the house. The three began to chase them. The three chased the animatrons in the woods around Clayburke's house. John noticed a FRDDY strangely taller than normal and decided to follow him with the others. Charlie woke up. The girl was trapped inside Freddy's costume by some snap locks. She tried to slowly deactivate them. She succeeded and tried to get out of the costume, which opened. There was no celebration. He found himself in a Freddy Fazbear Pizza, but this was like a cave, full of arcade games, tables and a stage, but it had never been used. Charlie heard a hello from afar. She waved. An animatron with the appearance of a child appeared to her. He was holding a balloon and a sign with the word balloons written in his hand. He began to greet her. Then some lights came on. The buzzing similar to that of Foxy and Freddy immersed itself in her ears. Everything in that room began to change. To try to attack Charlie, she ran away and locked herself in a closet. That closet had several robotic parts. Charlie noticed that cursed Ordo that looked so much like Freddy trying to catch it. Charlie ran away and tripped over John. Charlie didn't know how they got there. That buzz was deafening. Charlie told Clay that that buzz came from the lights, so he pointed the gun at them and shot. As soon as Clay destroyed the last light, everything became still, dead. The group heard a noise. An animatron resembling Bonnie was approaching them. The monstrous creature was also there. But someone else among them was approaching, a greenish one full of human organs, blood and metal. Dave. The Guardian had somehow survived, but now had another form, Springtrap. Everyone froze, even the animatrons. He began to explain that thanks to Charlie, he had obtained this new form, stronger and more intelligent. He had built those robots. His intent was to capture Charlie, because she had something he was interested in. But Clay shot him in the chest and immediately ordered Charlie, John and Jessica to run away. The group escaped from that strange cave, but blocking their passage was a lake of benzia. The group passed it, but the animatrons behind were slower than them. Clay took a lighter from his pocket. I threw it into the petrol and as a result it caught fire. The animatrons tried to escape. On fire, their illusion flickered, but Charlie was concentrated on something else, Springtrap. Springtrap was in fact running away. Charlie chased him. In the meantime the robots had recovered and surrounded Jessica, John and Clay. Freddy the Wolf and Bonnie were approaching. At a certain point the old animatrons of the first pizzeria targeted those created by Springtrap. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy were there to destroy those damn things. After the destruction, Clay ordered John to Jessica to find Charlie, who at the same time was chasing Springtrap. When he found him he started to fight with him. She got the better of him. Charlie asked him why he took his twin Sammy. He replied that he didn't take him but that he took her. Charlie stopped in confusion, but was joined by Clay, Jessica and John. At the cave where the protagonists were began to collapse. Clay ordered the others to leave. Charlie didn't want to. His brother's killer was escaping, but she was convinced by John. They were making their escape when Charlie saw something. The same iron door was there. Charlie started to hear noises. Charlie approached. John reached her shouting at her to run away. Charlie wasn't listening. Finally she was with Sammy, but then she was taken by John. Before she could say anything, John told her he loved her. Charlie was like back in reality. Charlie let John guide her. When something grabbed her, Freddy the bear, he was destroyed, but still working. He was carrying Charlie in his belly to kill her. Charlie screamed. Clay and Jessica arrived to help John in trying to free Charlie, but the snap locks had done their dirty work. Blood was coming out of that damn costume. John heard the police coming. Clay had called them. The police took Jessica and John away. The cave was collapsing. John tried to free himself. He wanted to help Charlie. John saw that next to the costume there was a woman. He was confused, but the collapsing building was taken out. Out of that cave, John noticed that it was Charlie's old house. Under Charlie's house there was that cave. Shortly after, the whole house collapsed, and John lost his bolts. A few days later, John and Jessica were gathered in a diner. Marla arrived asking for explanations. The two were crying when something caught their attention. A woman in a red dress was there in front of the diner. Was it Charlie? Jessica and Marla had become hopeful. They ran to hug Charlie. John didn't believe it. That wasn't Charlie.